Project. I'm one of the founding members and one of the original board members of the Wounded Warrior Project, which is a private nonprofit, and many of you may have heard of it. But anyway, they have an annual gala fundraiser in New York, and my wife, she likes to say she won it at an auction, but you know, you don't win anything at an auction. You bid the highest and you pay for it, so you don't really win it. But anyway, one of the packages that she bought was a package for the Philadelphia Phillies game tomorrow night. So we were going to come up for the Phillies game, and our daughter and her family live in Oxford, PA, which is, well, we kind of got mixed up coming up. It's probably a little over an hour to where they live. So they're coming up because we got 4 tickets, and I'm not sure what all we got out of the package. But anyway, so when I found out that we were coming up for the baseball game, I said to my wife, I said, you know, I ought to contact Janet and see if there's a class going on. Maybe I can come up and talk to the class while we're in Philadelphia. So that's how I ended up getting here. Janet asked me to talk about a few things. One was about myself a little bit in terms of what happened and how I got to where I am and what I'm doing and whatnot. Well, as Emily mentioned, I was in Vietnam. I was wounded in Vietnam in 1967, before many of you were born. And I got wounded, ended up losing a leg above the knee, right leg above the knee, and some other wounds. And I was born and raised in Pittsburgh. You know, I'll be 70 years old in November. When I was young and growing up, I never saw a disabled person, except for one. And he sat on the pavement in front of the department store downtown Pittsburgh. He was an amputee, and guess what he did? Had a cup with pencils. So when I realized, you know, I had worked, I graduated from high school, worked in a grocery store, local grocery store, and then got a job in the steel mill. Well, when I woke up and realized I only have one leg, I had no idea what I was going to do or what I could do. I had no role models, never saw a disabled person other than this person selling pencils. Here I am, steel worker, worked in the steel mill as a mechanic. No way I was going to go back and be able to go back into that because there was a lot of climbing and getting down into holes and whatnot. So I had this vision, I'm going to be sitting on a corner with pencils and a cup. That's all I can do because I had no college, a high school grad, did, you know, back then high school was high school, you know, I wasn't a real diligent student. But anyway, I was very, very fortunate. Unlike today's generation of wounded warriors, we were pushed out of the military as fast as possible. In part because I remember when I got wounded, I got my second surgery, which was the revision of my stump site to go above the knee in 1967, in June of '67. I wanted to go home for the weekend, for the 4th of July. So doctor's making his rounds, and I said, you know, I'd really like to go home for the weekend, for the 4th of July. I think the 4th was either a Friday or a Monday, so it was going to be a 3-day weekend. He said, how would you like to go home for a month? We need your bed. Well, at that time, there were so many wounded veterans coming back, or service members coming back. Walter Reed, the old Walter Reed, which is now closed, our beds were so close together, you could not walk between them, and you could not get a wheelchair between them. So you had to get out of your wheelchair at the bottom of the bed and then crawl over. Well, I remember I got to Walter Reed on like the middle of the night, Memorial Day of 1967. And again, kind of doped up, you know, a little confused and so forth and so on. Well, when I woke up the next morning, which was actually Memorial Day morning, and you know, hospital beds have these iron frames around them for the curtains and whatnot. When I woke up, I got out of bed, I woke up, and I look across the aisle to the beds across from me, and here's a gentleman, triple amputee, both legs and one arm missing, guitar strapped across his back, swinging from bed to bed. And I looked at him and I said, there's nothing wrong with me. If he can do that, I can do something. What, I don't know yet, but I know I'm going to stop feeling sorry for myself. And that was a real awakening for me in order to say, you know, I'm going to move on with my life. Again, I'm not sure what I'm going to do or what I can do, but I know I can do something. So anyway, I got out of, they sent me home July 4th, well, the weekend, and then I was gone for a month. And then I came back, and they put me in what they call medical hold back then. Today they call it warrior transition units, pending retirement. I ended up getting disability retirement. And I went home as a veteran. I got discharged November of 1967. And my wound was still open. I couldn't wear a prosthesis yet. So anyway, I finally got fitted for my prosthesis, and it came like in February. I had to go back into the VA hospital in Pittsburgh to learn how to walk on the prosthesis, which I'm not as good as I used to be because I'm getting old. But anyway, as I was leaving the hospital, after I had my 3 or 4 day therapy, learning how to walk and whatnot, I'm walking out the main hall, and I hear, "Mr. Drach, Mr. Drach, Mr. Drach." And I stopped, and I said, "Yes, that's me." He said, "How would you like to come to work for the VA?" I said, "Oh, doing what?" He said, "Helping other disabled vets." So I said, "Oh, sure." I was single, living at home, getting my VA compensation. My parents were very, very gracious, weren't charging me room and board, so my VA compensation went for beer money. So I had a good time. You know, I was taking it easy and not doing anything. And I figured, well, I'll go to work for the VA. If I don't like it, I'll just go back home. You know, I'll just stay at home and I won't do anything. I was just having too much fun. So anyway, I went to work for the VA, stayed there for 2.5 years. Liked it, but didn't like it. There was one of those things, you know, this is really not what I want to do for the rest of my life. Not that I didn't want to work with veterans, it's I didn't want to do it through the VA. Well, in the meantime, Disabled American Veterans, DAV, which I had become a member of, started talking to me. I was working right down the hall. Come to work for us. Come to work for us. Well, it's kind of like ambivalent about it. Do I really want to change jobs? Do I really want to leave the government? You know, the government, you work 9 to 5, you know, pretty easy. Anyway, I just got so frustrated. And plus I knew that if I went to work for DAV, I was going to have to relocate at some point in time. Didn't know to where, but one of the other offices. So eventually I got fed up with the VA and I left and I went to work for DAV. They had a 16-month training program under the VA's Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment Program. It was a combination of on-the-job training and academic training. And it was very individualized. The on-the-job training was very standard, but the academic training was individualized to the person based on his or her, at that time was mostly his, education and experience. So I ended up going to community college. I took some remedial courses. I took some regular college courses, anatomy and physiology, medical terminology, and a couple other things. So anyway, I became eventually a national service officer, where I actually represented disabled veterans before the VA for their claims. Ultimately, well, let me just jump forward a little bit. I stayed there in Pittsburgh, which is where I was born and raised. And by the way, tomorrow night, go Steelers. Tonight. So I've already scoped out the Steeler bars in the area. I think there's 3 or 4 that I'm looking at. I got my Steeler stuff back in my hotel room. So go Steelers. So anyway, I was a service officer for about, well, I went through the training 16 months, and then I was a full-fledged service officer. Well, I knew I was going to have to transfer, and I didn't want to transfer. My wife's mother was blind. She was a widow from World War II, lived alone, and my wife was, you know, kind of a quasi-caregiver. Her mother was pretty independent, but still needed some stuff. So we were a little bit reluctant to do this. So anyway, I ultimately took the job. We moved to D.C., which is not where we wanted to move. We said, if we're going to move, we want to make a break. We want to go to California, Texas. Had no clue, you know, what California was like, what Texas was like. We just wanted to make a break. So anyway, the boss said, how about D.C.? And I said, that's going to be a tough sell for my wife. Because at that time, this is like in early 70s, late 71. And all she remembered was from the news, and I remember because I was at Walter Reed, the riots in D.C. when they were burning down parts of D.C. and that was the image that we had, that, boy, D.C. is not a good place to live. You know, there's all kind of turmoil going on. So anyway, we ultimately went to D.C. I ended up getting promoted in 1970, late 72, and became the administrative assistant to the National Employment Director for DAV. Then in 1975, he got promoted, and the Peter Principle got kicked in, and I became the National Employment Director in 1975. I was the first Vietnam veteran within the DAV to be appointed as a National Director, so I was obviously very proud, very happy, very excited about this. And that was really that was like October of '72. And that was when I really started getting involved in employment, disability issues, vocational rehabilitation, into the policy area, program policy, legislative area. And then I started getting involved in the Social Security Disability Program and started representing veterans before Social Security for what was then called DIB, Disability Insurance Benefits. Now it's SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance. And actually developed a training program for the nationwide network of DAV service officers to represent veterans before the Social Security Administration, mainly at the administrative law judge level and the appeals council level. I did a lot of appeals council work, but I did only a few hearings at the administrative law judge level, but I developed the training and helped provide the training. So anyway, that lasted until 1998, doing employment, voc rehab, disability issues for DAV. In 1998, the economy was good. My 401 was doing well. I was only 54 years old, and looked at the my money, looked at my account and everything. And a friend of mine who was going to retire 2 months earlier, he was the one that talked me into looking at retirement. So I retired at age 54 from the DAV, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I was deathly afraid, deathly afraid. What am I going to do? Am I going to have enough money to live on the rest of my life, et cetera, et cetera? So anyway, life was good. I did some volunteer work at my daughter's school. I did some other volunteer work. Did a little bit of consulting work, not very much. And then in 2002, I got 2 job offers, one from the VA and one from Department of Labor. And I wasn't real excited about going back to work, but the economy started to tank, and I said, I don't know if my money's going to last. So my wife said, why don't you go back to work? I said, I think it's time to go back to work. So I went back to work. I went to the Department of Labor, worked for the Veterans Employment and Training Service for 8.5 years, working, and this, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later, but my boss was one of the best people I ever worked for. And now here I was at this time, I was around 58 years old, 59 years old, and I had all these years of work behind me, 30 years behind me, and I never really understood or even thought about the difference between a good manager and a good leader. Well, this boss, he was a colonel in the Army. He was in Vietnam. Was awarded the Silver Star, and the Silver Star is not something you get just because you're a nice person. And one of my perspectives and one of my philosophies was, in terms of my respect for you as a supervisor or as a boss, would I follow you into combat without asking questions? And I said, I would follow him into combat without asking any questions. If he told me to do something, I would do it. So anyway, we had a really good relationship, and one of the things that he let me do, he understood my background. He was not a micromanager. He knew what you knew. Well, he knew that you knew what you knew, and he knew what you didn't know. Does that make sense? But anyway, my title was Director, Strategic Planning and Government Relations. Well, I knew how to spell strategic planning, and didn't know how little I knew about strategic planning until I got into the job. And both of us realized that this ain't me, you know, about a month later. So anyway, he eventually changed my job description, gave the strategic planning to somebody else, and I became the director for government, what was it, director for government and legislative affairs. Because I did all the legislation stuff, I wrote all the testimony and everything. So that lasted 8.5 years, and he left. He was a political appointee, I was not. The new people came in, and the new supervisor, the new boss, the new assistant secretary, and he and I didn't get along very well, so I said, yeah, it's time to go. So I retired again in September 30th of 2010, so almost 4 years ago. And I went back into consulting. I can't remember exactly when I met Janet. I think I was working for Department of Labor when I first met Janet. She was doing some sort of a breakfast seminar on hiring people with disabilities and whatnot. So I went to the breakfast, and that's when I first met Janet. And then we became friends, and we've talked over the years and done things together. And she's presented at functions that I've been presenting at, and so forth and whatnot. So we've had a good relationship. So I'm going to talk about. Stop talking about me and start talking about some other things. I think you have a list of resources that I prepared. Some of these may not be of any interest to you at all. Some of them may be of interest, but there are two, at least, that I suggest you take a look at. One is the Job Accommodation Network, JAN. JAN is a nonprofit, it's based out of the University of West Virginia, funded by the Department of Labor, but it provides, and it's www.jan.org. And it's a free service to employers, to students, to rehab specialists, to caregivers, to anybody that will help that person understand what job accommodations are available and how to obtain them and so forth. Most job accommodations are very, very inexpensive. The reason I bring this up to you all, at some point you're going to go out there and you're going to be looking for a job after you're finished with your training. So if you need an accommodation, you can identify what the accommodation may be. So when you go in that job interview, you can identify, hey, I need this accommodation. I need whatever it may be. And I just want to let you know that it would cost about $50. Because you know, you've done your research, you've looked at the Job Accommodation Network, and you've found these resources that might be helpful to you in accommodating your disability in the workplace. That way the employer is not blindsided in the sense of, oh my God, I'm going to hire somebody and I don't know what to do because he or she can't do certain functions, and you know. So if you go armed with the information that you know what your accommodation needs are, and you can identify where they can be purchased or where they can be received, you're good to go. The other one is Project, excuse me, EARN, E-A-R-N, and I forget what the acronym is. The EARN is more informative. It's a newsletter, and you can go on. It's the website is somewhere on that sheet, but you can go on there. You can go on the website to EARN, and you can sign up for their newsletters. And again, it's not something that you can't live without. But again, if you're interested, it's informative. It has a lot of topical news when it comes out. You can take a look at it, and you can go from there. But I talked about, I don't know how many books you've been told to read or look at or potentially be referred to. You know, what color is my parachute, and all these other different, you know. This book here, I just finished reading it a couple weeks ago, and it's called Forget a Mentor, Find a Sponsor. Now this was written primarily targeting women and minorities, but it has application to any group, any person, any individual, regardless of your age, race, color, creed, etc., etc., etc. But the author of this book wrote it because of the glass ceiling, so to speak. the premise of the book is, and she's not putting down mentors. Mentors are very important. But what she's saying is, you really, really need a sponsor. I never thought about it, but when I started reading this, I started thinking, I've had sponsors. I didn't realize there were sponsors. A sponsor is basically somebody that you work with, who may be a supervisor, may be a coworker, but generally it's a supervisor or somebody higher up the hierarchy than you are. So let's say I'm working for XYZ Corporation. I just started a month ago, and I'm working and I'm trying really hard, and I really want to move ahead. Well, I need to find this sponsor who has responsibility and has some authority. The other boss is looking for to put together a group to work on a special project. So my sponsor comes forward and says, Ron Drach would be a good person for that team because he's got such experience, so forth and so on. So that sponsor, to some extent, is sticking his or her neck out, saying Ron Drach can do what you need to have done on this team. So he or she becomes my sponsor. Well, the nice thing about sponsor, which is different than a mentor also, is that the sponsorship is a give and take. My sponsor expects me to perform at or above the level he is hyping me about, so that my work, my responsibility, it reflects back on him or her. So the next time my sponsor wants to sponsor somebody else, my sponsor has obtained some credibility with his or her boss because of referring somebody that's done a good job. The performance was what they expected it to be. So a sponsor is really after you get a job. And that's not to say you shouldn't continue to have a mentor, but mentors are really more important as you're looking for a job. Find somebody that will be your mentor, ideally in the type of industry that you want to work in, or wherever, so that but you need that. And when I started reading the book about sponsors, I looked back and I said, you know, I had a sponsor in 1975 because when I was about to be promoted within the DAV's a nonprofit, some people said he's too young, too immature, doesn't know enough, so forth and so on. Well, my boss became my sponsor, and he said, trust me, he can do it. So my boss became my sponsor and stuck his neck out. And he also suggested, put him on a trial work period. If he doesn't work out after 6 months or a year or whatever, remove him. Give him a chance. I got the chance. I became the National Employment Director in 1975 and retired 23 years later because my former boss, well, at that time he was still my boss, became my sponsor. When I was working at the DAV near the end of my career, I don't know how many of you know much about the VA. Jesse Brown was my boss at DAV near the end before I retired. He became the Secretary of Veterans Affairs under President Clinton in the early 90s. Jesse was a sponsor, which again I didn't realize because Jesse was pushing me out there. He was putting me on these different things, and I had no idea what a sponsor was. When I went to the Department of Labor, my boss, who was the Assistant Secretary, political appointee, I was a career employee, very, very unique. I was a career employee, but I reported directly to him. He did my performance evaluations. He did everything. He was my boss. He continually assigned me to different groups, different projects, different task groups. And again, I didn't realize that he was sponsoring me because he had the confidence in me, and in return, my performance was to the point where it made him look good because he appointed somebody that knew what they were doing and could deliver it. Now, I don't mean that egotistically. I'm not, hyping myself, but it's an example of how the sponsorship works. But if you get sponsored, you've got to be very, 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 very conscious of the payback. So if I sponsor you and you get on a task group, you better perform, because it's going to reflect back on me also. So if you don't perform, I'm going to be very, very upset, and I may be reluctant to sponsor anybody else. So you want to, keep that momentum going when you get a sponsor or become a sponsor yourself, and ultimately you may become a sponsor. I never thought of myself as a sponsor, and I've never consciously set out to do it. I became a mentor and a sponsor for a female veteran who's she's about 40, 41 years old now. She was a paratrooper, and her parachute didn't open. So she became pretty severely injured. She never talks about her disability, but I'm guessing, because she said she can't walk long distances, she can't stand long periods of time. My guess is that she's got back, maybe pelvic, when you come down and there's no parachute, you're landing on your feet. I mean, I can't imagine what it's doing to, that whole area, but I would imagine back, hips, pelvis, any number of those body parts. So anyway, a job came open. I knew her at the VA. She worked at the VA. Then she worked for VA Voc Rehab, and we became good friends. And she wanted to go back and get her PhD. So she called me and says, I'm gonna leave VA. I've got enough money to live, but I really would like to get either maybe a small part-time job or maybe some consulting. So anyway, I got her 2 consulting jobs, one of which lasted for about 4 years, but it was just enough to give her some extra income, but not enough, to live on, because she was living off of her savings and her VA compensation. So anyway, she would, so now she gets her PhD. Consulting work is not coming, so a job opening becomes available in the agency that I used to work for, Department of Labor, for a new women veterans coordinator. She can do that. So I, again, unknowingly became a sponsor. I called the people that I knew at DOL, and I said, here's a person I'm going to have her apply, and I want you to make sure she gets a fair shake. Obviously, I wasn't demanding that she be hired, but she has to be interviewed, because I think you'll like her. So anyway, she decides, she reads the job description. She says, I'm not going to apply. I said, why? She says, I'm not qualified. I said, what do you mean you're not qualified? She said, look at this, this, and this. And I said, yeah. I said, but you know what? Nobody's qualified. This is a new position. It's a new job description. Nobody's ever done it before. So nobody has the experience, in those 3 or 4 areas. So ultimately, I convinced her, I said, apply. I said, the worst case scenario, you won't get it. Well, at this point, she's becoming a little desperate. Her savings are dwindling. She really wants to go back to work. So I said, get your resume together, send it to me, let me take a look at it, which I did, made a few minor tweaks. And the chief of staff of the assistant secretary at the agency, I've been working with him. And he said, when she applies, send me her resume. Well, I am jumping around and I'm kind of reading between the lines. Apparently, he put her resume on the top of the pile. Short story, long story. I'll try to make it a little shorter. She got the job. That was a year ago, a little over a year ago. I saw her boss yesterday, the assistant secretary, at a meeting, and he thanked me and said what a great job she's doing. Yeah. Now I am going to jump ahead a little bit. One of the things that's talked about in the book is, let me find it here. And I'm quoting from the book. It's on page 102. And I'm not suggesting that you buy this book, but I am suggesting that you consider going to the library and taking it out.
What's the name of it? That's what I was going to ask. The name of the author.
Let me get a little bit closer. I have trouble hearing.
Oh, okay. The name of the book and the author. Can you repeat the
yes,
name of the
yes,
book and then
yes.
give us the author?
But anyway, on page, I'll do it just a
okay,
on
sure.
page 102, it says, quote, deliver outside your job description. Now, I want you to be a little careful on that. because what you do, what your job description, that's your primary job, obviously. And your boss may want you to do nothing but what is in your job description. And if you go outside that line, you might get in trouble. So you need to kind of know the philosophy of your supervisor, whether or not he or she is comfortable with you. My boss at the Department of Labor, I was into everything. Anything and anything that I wanted to do, he supported me. I was into everybody. I didn't try to get too involved, but I got involved to some extent with virtually every program administered by our agency, because I had done it before when I was working for DAV. Homeless veterans, transitioning military service members, VA voc rehab, state voc rehab, a whole bunch of different things. So he was comfortable in letting me work outside my job description. Well, the woman that I just mentioned who got the job in this new position at the Department of Labor, I was trying to be a friend and give her friendly advice. And I said something to her about going to some meeting I think was very important for her to be at. And she got really huffy. And she said, "Don't you try to rewrite my job description for me." So I said, "Okay, lessons learned, I'm sorry." The point here, for me anyway, was that she had an opportunity to expand her reach. And she's looking very narrowly at her job description. So there's a balance there. I think that she had an opportunity to expand her job description without, well, I'll read it to everybody so everybody gets it, to expand her reach, if you will, and become known outside of one area. You got to be careful, I guess. There's a balance here. You don't want to get pigeonholed into a position where you become known as the woman veterans expert. That's fine, because she wants to be the go-to person on women veterans issues. But also, this is where being a generalist also is very important, so that again you can do different things for different people and have different results. The name of the book, parentheses, Forget a Mentor, close parentheses, Find a Sponsor. And then the subtitle is The New Way to Fast Track Your Career. Sylvia Ann Hewlett, Hewlett, is the author of the book. Now, I'm gonna give you a couple of other. Emily, Janet said about a half an hour. I see it's almost 10:30, and I know she wants to leave some for Q&A. So you tell me if I'm.
No, I'm here.
Okay. All right. If I could, let me. Okay. Okay. Here's a. Oh, I thought I wrote. Okay. Act like a leader, and leaders will take you under their wing. The leader being the sponsor. That's on page 47 of the book. Deliver outside your job description is on page 102. So there's a lot of other narrative that leads up to this. So you can take things out of context by just reading the one quote, but you need to read some of the other stuff that's really in there. On page 133, propose solutions rather than present problems. Here's another example. As I mentioned, I did all the congressional work for the Department of Labor's office that I worked in. So anytime there was a congressional hearing, I had to write the first draft of the testimony. And I was ultimately responsible for the final draft and the final version that went up to Capitol Hill. Congress, the one committee that we worked with, had a very bad habit of giving us sometimes less than a week to write and prepare and get testimony up to them. The Office of Management and Budget, who has to approve this testimony, has a role that we, the agency, has to give it to them 2 weeks before the hearing. Well, if I get the request for the hearing a week before, there's no way I'm going to get the testimony to OMB 2 weeks before. So anyway, I get this call. We're going to have a hearing next Tuesday. This was like Thursday, not even a week. So I go to my boss and I said, we got a problem. And he said, what's that? I said, we got a hearing next Tuesday. He said, that's not a problem. That's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to us to tell them what we're doing and how we're doing it and how well we're doing it. So that was, I've never forgotten that. He said, you know, I saw it as a problem. He saw it as an opportunity. So now I don't see problems. I see opportunities. So if I'm in some of my consulting work, if I get a deadline or something, which isn't very frequent, but if I do, I don't think of it as a problem. I think of it as an opportunity to show my client that I can deliver. So think about those kinds of things. You know, if somebody throws something at you and you say, oh man, that's a problem, I can't handle that. Think of it as an opportunity to show that you can do it, that you prove that you can do it, and you can do it on a timely basis. And I already mentioned about outside your job description. That's on page 102. Act like a leader. Okay, now this is, again, my personal philosophy, and I think it applies. I've mentioned I'll be 70 years old in November. One of my goals is to learn something new every day. When I mentioned that I was not a good high school student. Learning, education, oh man, who wants to learn anything? And now I have a thirst for knowledge. I want to learn. You know, I'm at the end of my career. Why am I reading a book like this? Well, I never thought about it when I bought it, but I'm using it in a presentation. You know, but I learned from it. There's some good information in here. And to me, this is one of the best books you can invest in because of so many good tips in here about how to navigate the job market and how to better yourself and how to get ahead and so forth and whatnot. So read. You know, look at professional journals. Now, I know that one of your goals is sort of technology. I did a webinar presentation about wounded warriors for the ARPCT, Association of Rehabilitation Programs in Association of Rehabilitation Programs in Computer Technology. If you Google, and it's not on your list, I apologize. If you Google ARPCT, it'll get you to their website. Since you're all interested to some degree in technology, it might be informative for you to go onto their website and take a look at what might be available through their website that could help you in your future, what you can do. It's also a membership organization. It's $50 a year, which is pretty expensive for somebody just starting out. But you don't have to be a member to look at their website. Go in and take a look at it and see what you can do. Now, membership in various organizations is very similar. It's all part of your networking effort. And networking is very, very important, and it ties in with the sponsorship and the mentorship. You've got to have your own network. You've got to build a network as you go along. Your network consists of relatives. It might be a neighbor. It might be a friend. It might be a former coworker. It might be a former boss. It might be somebody here. Because when you leave here, you've had instructors. Okay, can that instructor be part of your network? Can that instructor maybe be a mentor? He or she couldn't be a sponsor because they're not going to be working. You're going to be working. So think about how you can build your network. Now, I'll give you the name of another book, and I can't remember the author, but the name of the book is Never Eat Alone. And it's one of numerous books about networking. And again, I'm not suggesting that you buy it. I am suggesting that you might want to take a look at it, get it from the library if you want, thumb through it. But it's all about networking. Somebody recommended it to me about 10 years ago, and I bought it. And I started reading it. I got like maybe to page 10. And I said, I do this. I've been doing it. The only difference between me and the author was smart enough to write a book about it, and I wasn't. But again, it's all about relationships and what can you do for somebody else. Don't be looking at it as what I can do for you. First look at it what you can do for me, so that again, you're proving your value to me and my aspirations, my goals, my job, whatever. It's going to come back to you because I know that you can deliver. So, you know, networking is very important when you're looking for a job, but in my experience, it's also very important when you have a job, because you can't know everything. But, and this is one of the things that one of my bosses, who was a sponsor, again, I didn't know it at the time, when I first started working for him in late 1972, he said, I know you don't know everything. And you know, I don't expect you to know everything. But I do expect you to know where to find the answer. Research. Where do I find the answer to this problem or this question or this issue? Back then, we didn't have the internet. You know, we didn't, I guess, maybe we had computers. No, we had the select typewriters where you could go in and change typos. But anyway, now it's so easy to find that resource. That directory that I put together for you all was a part of another directory that I put together for George Washington University, who was one of my clients. But it's so easy, you know. So again, if you don't feel frustrated if somebody throws something at you and you don't know the answer, you're only as far away from the answer as the internet. It's amazing, you know. I shouldn't say I'm surprised, but I've never had when I go into, I'm making a commercial for Google, but I am, I guess, in a way. Unbelievable how you can find things with just a small iota of information to type into Google, and you get what you're looking for. I mean, it's unbelievable how all of these resources, all this information is stored, and Google knows what to find when you put, you know, a very, very simplistic description into the system. So anyway, take a look outside. What organizations are available that might be of interest to you? Well, one is you're all on Social Security. You're all ticket to work, so you have some disability of some extent. The American Association of People with Disabilities, AAPD.org. It's a membership organization, and I thought there was a charge for it, but I just went in to join up again about a month ago, and there's no charge. So AAPD, American Association of People with Disabilities, I suggest you take a look at their website and join. Again, it's a networking opportunity. And when you get involved with an organization, and maybe some of you are involved in your local church groups or your civic community groups or some other group, take a look at that group and see, are there any subgroups? Are there any task groups? Are there, you know, what is going on within that society, within that structure? And take a look at it and see, is there something that has specific interest to you above or beyond the major scope of it? And volunteer. Maybe there's going to be a fundraiser dinner coming up, you know, next spring. Volunteer to be on the committee to help set up the fundraiser, the dinner, whatever it is. Take a look at that. I just also joined. Now these other two organizations that I joined. Well, I mentioned the Association of Rehab Programs and Computer Technology. I joined that, and I joined the NCIL, National Council of Independent Living. The reason I joined that is I just finished a project for the VA Voc Rehab on their independent living program, and I got an interest in independent living issues and so forth and so on. That was $35. Again, not a lot of money for me, maybe a lot of money for somebody just starting out. I'm not suggesting that you do that you join any of these. The other is that I just joined, again, was $35. the National Alliance on Mental Illness. There's a lot of issues on mental illness, as you all know, and Robin Williams' suicide really brought a lot of attention to it the last couple of weeks. But a lot of returning wounded warriors have mental health issues, behavioral health issues, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, other behavioral issues. So I want, as an advocate for this group and as part of what I do in consulting, I want to know more about mental illness. I don't want to be a clinician, but I want to know enough that I can advocate for treatment modalities, I can advocate for services, I can advocate and know about referrals so that I become more and more aware of what's out there in the mental illness capacity. Now, again, it was $35. It's tax deductible for me because it's a business expense. But I think it was the NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness. They sent me my acknowledgement, and then they had a list of groups within that organization. One was veterans, so I checked off the box and sent it back. But some of the others that I remember off the top of my head, one was a group on civil rights. So if you're interested in being involved in civil rights for people with mental illness, you would want to check off that box and become part of that group. Now this was just the other day that I sent it back, so I haven't heard anything back about what they may want me to do. So anyway, again, it's all a lot of networking and sponsorship, as I mentioned, is done or received really not knowing that it's going on. So you've got to really, be thinking about that and how it all works. Join organization. Also, by doing what I just mentioned in terms of volunteering to be on the committee to set up the fundraiser dinner next spring, you're exposing yourself to other people in your group as a person that's willing to step up to the plate and do something for the organization. That's not lost on your fellow members, and it's also not lost on the leadership. Here's a person that I can rely on. Here's a person that's willing to take a chance, who's willing to step up and help us in an area that's very labor intensive. We have a lot of work to do. And let's see how we can use that person in the future. Maybe the following year, you did such a good job, the leadership says, will you head up the committee? Will you be responsible? Will you gather the people that will put together the dinner next year? So that all, sort of cascades into your network and your sponsorship and your ability to let people know what you're doing, what you can do, what you want to do, so forth and whatnot. I think I've just about covered everything that I meant to do this at the beginning and I forgot. But let me just talk again about the networking. How many of you are on Facebook? Okay. All right, not quite a half. How many of you are on LinkedIn? LinkedIn. Only 2 or 3 of you. Okay, here's my take, and then how many are on Twitter? I absolutely hate Twitter. I cannot stand Twitter. I got on Twitter, I have no idea how Twitter works. I absolutely hate it. Now, if this was, let me read it here before I get it over. If X was a country, it would be the 3rd largest country in the world. Any idea what X is? Facebook. There's enough members on Facebook that if it were a country, the population would be the 3rd largest in the world. Now, Facebook, when I first got involved on Facebook, it's a long story, but basically I had no idea, no plan on getting involved. But we connected with, they weren't really estranged, but my wife's nephews, we hadn't seen them in years. And it was just one of those things, we just hadn't seen them. Well, the one nephew, I say cousin, the one nephew reached out to our daughter, because he knew her name and knew, you know, so forth. And she was on Facebook. Well, his name is Richard. His uncle's name is Richard. His uncle passed away several years ago. Well, Richard contacts our daughter to join him on Facebook. She freaked out because Richard was dead. She knew she had this cousin, but she had never met him. And she didn't really know what his name was. We always called him Ricky. When he was little, he was Ricky. So anyway, she freaked out. She called us. I got this, you know, invitation. So anyway, that's how I got involved in Facebook. And I'll never forget, and this was, I don't know, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, all these friends on Facebook used to post these things. Boy, Johnny was terrible today. I'm glad he's in bed now, and I can have a glass of wine and watch the soap opera. Who cares? You know, I don't care about Johnny. I don't care that you're going to have a glass of wine. But I've seen over the last year or so, Facebook has become a little bit more professional. At least the people that I am friends with that post on it. And I've gotten some really, really good information off of Facebook. The other thing that you can do on Facebook is make a professional page. I have Drach Consulting. So if you go to www.facebook.com/Drach Consulting, you can go on my page and you can like me or not like me, whatever you want to do. But anyway, and I use that more for my professional life. So I will post something later today that I did a presentation here this morning. I probably won't post it on my main Facebook. LinkedIn is also, to me, is the professional version of Facebook. It's really, really informative. And there's groups within LinkedIn. So again, I would suggest you join LinkedIn. It's free, you know, linkedin.com. Become a member of LinkedIn. And then look at some of the subgroups. Give me a second. Look at some of the subgroups. For example, there may be a group called Computer Technology. Join that group of Computer Technology. If there isn't one, maybe you want to start one. You can start your own group. I started Drach Consulting on LinkedIn. Same thing. I just use it as a business. Yes, sir. Do you have a question?
Some of the features on LinkedIn, if you're not a paid subscriber, you can't use.
Well, yeah, there's some features on LinkedIn if you're not a paid subscriber you can't use. I'm not recommending that you pay for a subscription on LinkedIn. I use it for what I can use it, and there's no charge for but I get notices like once a week about upgrading. You can upgrade. They offer me a free month subscription. Well, one thing that I've learned in my almost 70 years is don't take advantage of any free limited subscription, because it automatically reverts to a paid after 30 days or a year or whatever. And if you're not vigilant to make sure you cancel it, you're going to get hit with a bill for $100 a year or whatever. So you have to be careful about any of these free trial doohickeys. And just like some of these ads on TV, try for 30 days and return. Guess what? I can't tell you how many things I have in the basement that I took on a trial basis and never returned. These ad people know how to get into your head. They know that you're not going to return it because it's a pain in the butt. You know, especially if it's heavy or if it's bulky or if it's big. You have to figure out, I have to package this thing up. I have to take it back to the post office, or I have to take, you know, and sometimes it has to be returned by UPS. You have to find a UPS or a FedEx distributor. It's a real pain in the butt. So you end up saving it, and I'm just visualizing some of this. There's at least 5 things in my basement that I took as a trial that I ended up paying for that were free. Okay, let me go into questions. Any other questions? Comments? Yes, ma'am. No, I'm going to walk back. I have a hearing problem, and so I'm going to get up there really close to things so I can hear you better.
Well, thank you, sir. Allow me to introduce myself.
Okay.
I'm Susan Graham.
Susan, nice to meet you.
Pleasure. And I've been battling mental illness most of my adult life for a very long time.
Thank you.
And my question to you is someone, if you met someone like who has major depressive disorder, like I do, and they feel discouraged because they can't work full time and stuff in the workforce. What do you tell them?
Well, you know, I mentioned mental illness. I'm not a clinician, and I'm not an expert. I think, regardless of, and I don't want to minimize mental illness or depression or anything else, I think whatever your disability is, you've got to try to stick with it. You've got to be perseverance. You've got to say, hey, tomorrow is going to be a little bit better than today. So a lot of it is, you know, it's very easy for me to talk. Again, I'm on a commission, so I don't want to try to give you, you know, medical advice. But I think you just have to really try to find coping mechanisms. What coping mechanisms are out there? The National Alliance for Mental Illness. You might want to go on their website. It's NAMI.org. There might be some hints in there on how to cope with different things. And I don't want to compare myself to somebody with depression or any other mental illness. But you know, I'm an amputee.
What website was that again, sir?
I wear glasses.
What website was that again?
NAMI.org.
NAM?
NAMI. National Alliance on Mental Illness. NAMI.org.
Thank you.
So, and I meant to mention this earlier when I talked about the Job Accommodation Network. I've never needed an accommodation for work until roughly the early 2000s when I started losing my hearing. I've been an amputee since 1967. Never had a problem with work. Never had a problem getting to work. Never had a problem associated with my amputation. When I started losing my hearing, I needed assistive hearing devices. Now, when I do presentations to employers and others, I talk about Job Accommodation Network, and I tell them I'm a walk-in example of accommodations. I could lie on this table, and you could use me as a model of accommodation. I get up in the morning. How many people? 1, 2, 3. How many people have glasses? How many of you ever thought about eyeglasses as an accommodation? I can't read that without my glasses. I can see you. I can read the big print from here. Custom Guide, Windows 7, Word 2010. I can read. But if I want to read, I have to have an accommodation. Now, hearing aids obviously is a little bit more obvious that without them I can't hear. But I get up in the morning, shower, get ready, put my leg on. It's an accommodation because now I can walk instead of having to use crutches. Put my glasses on, accommodation, so I can see the alarm clock or I can see my emails on my iPhone. I put my hearing aids in so I can hear what's going on. Now, even with my hearing aids, I have some real significant problems with the TV, movies, so forth. In addition to having a hearing loss, which is fairly compensated okay by my hearing aids, but I have a word discrimination problem. I misunderstand a lot of words. My wife and I were driving up yesterday, and I forget what we were very frustrated because, I don't know, we're driving north from DC, and MapQuest said at some point you took 495 north and into Delaware, and then you swing back into 95 north in Philadelphia. Well, we followed the direction. Well, guess what? 495 was closed. So we drove around and around and around, and my wife said something about it. 4 times she mentioned we need an atlas. I understood we need. I had no idea what she was saying when she was saying atlas. And and I'm sitting right. She's driving. I'm sitting right next to her. So it wasn't that I couldn't hear her. I couldn't understand her. So that's one of my big hearing problems, is being able to understand the words. Not so much hearing you, it's understanding you in many cases. Any other questions? Boy, I'm either awful good and gave you all the information you need going forward. There we go.
With the sponsor.
Let me come back that way a little bit. Actually, Emily, would you mind being the interpreter? Because I can hear Emily real well. She's got a good, strong voice.
Wow, great.
Good morning, my name is Lavina Porter, and I was listening to you about mentor and sponsor. And I was like, this is probably like a dumb question. You kind of know a little bit, but then I wanted to ask you to get it started into a field that you may be interested in. But you don't know any person on the outside right now. Not until you get there. What can I do to try to make a contact, make some kind of connection with someone that's in that field that they can mentor me or be a potential sponsor, like I'm saying it right now. I don't know anybody, I'm hypothetical.
Well,
But I know I need a sponsor or a mentor. So how do you start?
as I mentioned,
research?
mentors are perhaps more valuable while you're looking for a job. You find somebody in the industry that you want to work in. You may find that person through a friend, a relative, a neighbor, somebody in your church group, somebody in your, whatever ever is in your network, and you get introduced to that person. Obviously that person has to be willing to be a mentor. There are some professional mentoring organizations. There's one that's been established up in New York, but it's specifically for warriors coming back, and it's called America's, I forget what it's called, but anyway, it's not for the general public. But again, Google mentorship, and try to find someone. Now, a sponsor is somebody that you find once you get the job, because a sponsor is not really much use to you while you're looking for a job. But it might be, again, somebody in the industry, somebody who's willing to take a chance. You may find a sponsor again in your church group or your social group, whatever social group you're in, that maybe you're a little bit reluctant to volunteer, and you find somebody that says, you can do this, you can lead, you can be the director, you can be the chair of the fundraising dinner next month or next year. So that person kind of becomes a sponsor. It's not something, to some extent it is, somebody will find you. But how do they find you? Well, it's, the carriage and the horse, which comes first? Well, if again, you're involved in your social group, whatever it may be, people recognize you. And again, by doing, saying, volunteering, it becomes known. She's a go-to person. She's the kind of person that I want to help. She may be the kind of person I'm looking for the job vacancy I have at my company. And there may be no relationship between you and me as an employer, but because we're both in the same church group or social group, that's where the networking, perhaps mentorship, perhaps sponsorship comes into play through some social gathering, through some social networking. I don't mean that through Facebook, but through that hands-on involvement as a volunteer. A lot of volunteer opportunities morph into job opportunities. Now, going way back, probably 30 years ago, 28 years ago, we had a good friend who, her daughter was going to school with our daughter. She volunteered to be the librarian at the school. Well, guess what? About a year later, they hired her. So here is a person. Now, she didn't really need to go to work. Her husband was pretty well off. But anyway, she didn't need to go to work, but she wanted to do something, so she volunteered. And then when they offered her a job, she said, "Oh yeah, if I'm doing it for free, why won't I do it for pay?" So and again, you just don't know. So think about the opportunities that you may have in your community, whatever they may be. What can I do as a volunteer? Now, some of you may not have a lot of opportunity to volunteer. You may have child care responsibilities. You may have adult daycare type responsibilities with a sibling or with a parent so your time may be limited. But look to see what you can network through the internet. Find out what's available. Sometimes you can do things. I can't think of a good example that you could do, but there are things you can do from home. Maybe you could be the treasurer for your daughter's Girl Scout, or something. Again, not only does it give you a networking opportunity, but it allows you to pick up some other skills, so that when you start doing your resume, and you say, geez, I haven't worked in 10 years, or I haven't worked in 5 years, or I don't have any work experience. Well, you put down your volunteer experience. So it's not that I've been sitting home doing nothing. I've been working. I'm not working. I've been going to classes. I'm learning computer technology. Excuse me. I'm heading up the banquet fundraising committee. I'm the treasurer of my daughter's. So take a look at when you're building your resume. And I'm not a resume writer expert, but look at how you can fill in those gaps. What have you done? What are you doing? And how you can. So that's why I'm a strong believer in volunteerism. If you have time to do it, try to find time to do it, so they can help build your relationships and help build your skills, help build your network.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
My name is Manuel.
Manuel?
And I'm a disabled veteran and single parent. What I was wondering is, are there programs that are geared for a specific situation?
I'm not sure.
So she's a disabled vet and a single parent.
Okay.
Is wondering if there's any programs that are geared specifically towards.
Boy, none that I can think of off the top of my head. But again, Google programs for single parents. See what pops up. Single parents. I wish I could give you something better than that. That's really not an area that I have any expertise in. But when all else fails, Google. I'm sure you'll find something. And even through the network here, how many single parents are there here? I'm not asking you to raise your hand, but are there other single parents? Part of your network are other single parents. And it brings up a thought. Caregivers. One of the big issues for returning wounded, ill, and injured service members, particularly those with traumatic brain injury and maybe post-traumatic stress and other mental illness, is caregivers. Typically, a caregiver is a spouse. But it can be a sibling, it can be a parent, but probably about 90% are spouses. And within that caregiver community, we're talking about spouses that are 18, 19, 20 years old. And when I see some of these situations, it really grabs your heart. Here's this young woman, basically barely out of high school, pregnant, 19 years old, with a husband that she's going to have to take care of the rest of her life. A lot of these caregivers are very, very confused and lost. The Wounded Warrior Project has a caregiver program that offers support, but it also offers respite care, so that these caregivers can be taken and they go somewhere for a weekend. But one of the nice things is it gets them away from being that intensive caregiver for 24/7, and it brings them together with other caregivers, and they learn from one another. And so I may get up and say, boy, my husband last week, he just did something, I just don't know what to do. And the other caregiver, oh, my husband went through that last month, and here's what we did, and here's our resource, and it worked out. So again, networking, and you find out, I'm not alone. I'm not the only person that's experiencing this. My spouse is not the only person that's displaying this type of behavior. So again, it helps educate everybody because you're learning from one another, and what better way to learn than from experience? So it's very, very helpful. Yes, sir.
I'm just wondering, what is your opinion of the ticket to work?
What is my opinion of the ticket to work?
Be honest, please.
I was involved to some degree when the ticket was first developed. And I was very excited about it. And then I became very disillusioned with it. This was going back when it first started. Now, the ticket has evolved. It's become a lot more popular. It's become a lot more effective. And I think the ticket is a good program. Maybe not for everybody. One of the problems, again, I'm not an expert, but one of the problems that I've seen over the years with the ticket is finding a Sierra group who will take your ticket and help you get trained, get a job, whatever. So we need more Sierra groups around the country, and there may be a lot of them. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not an expert on the ticket to work. I think in the past, not currently, because I don't know that much about it. In the past, when I was disillusioned with it, I thought it was raising false expectations.
It hugged me.
People were getting their ticket. Part of it back then, and it's like any new program when it first gets started, there's a lot of bugs in it. A lot of people don't know how to work it. They don't know how to do it. But in the early days, there weren't enough providers. And the providers that there were didn't really understand what they were supposed to do. So it was kind of like the recipient wasn't really sure what to do. The provider wasn't really sure what to do. So there was a disconnect, and quite honestly, in the early to mid 90s, I think it started like in early 90, 92, somewhere around there. It just, I thought, was pretty much a failure. But it's grown, and it's grown.
No, actually, it didn't get going until after my graduation from college, and that was 1996, and it hugged me out to dry.
Yeah, well, that was back in the 90s.
It sucked.
Yeah, well,
and blindness and visual services sucked.
yeah. Well, again, part of it, I think, and again, we're going back to when I was disillusioned with it back in the 90s when it first started. A lot of it was State VR didn't know what to do with it, Social Security didn't know what to do with it. It's like so many other things that Congress does. They develop a new program, they throw it at Social Security, they throw it at HHS, they throw it at Medicare, they throw it at the VA, without any real knowledge or idea of how they want it to work. They have this grandiose idea, let's give this ticket, every unemployed, disabled person can use the ticket and they can go to work and they'll get off of Social Security. Not, it's not for everybody. And again, a lot of programs are what the person, and in this case, the Sierra Group, makes of it. If you provide good training, and I asked Emily before we came in, what is your placement rate? 80%. 80% of the people that go through this training get jobs. That's, excuse my French, that's damn successful. 80% return on anything is very, very successful. Pat yourself on the back, Sierra Group. People with disabilities, and particularly people with a ticket, perhaps have been out of the labor force for many years. So, and I don't mean this pejoratively, but you've been out of the labor force, and therefore it's that much more difficult to get you back in because employers, the unemployment rate, employers are looking for people that are job ready, that have skills. You're going to get out of here, you're going to be job ready, you're going to have skills. You're going to be of value to employers. So that's what this is all about, is training, education, networking, sponsorship. All of this rolls into one to make sure that opportunities are there. Now, we can't make sure that the opportunities are there. We can train and we can help and we can assist for the job opportunities that are there. We have to be careful also that we don't train people for occupations that don't exist. Now, I saw this a lot in the 70s with Vietnam veterans. Folk rehab, whether it's VA or state or whatever, I'm a counselor. Oh, look at this study. It says the future is robotics. Okay, we're going to teach you all robotics. Okay, has anybody looked to see what the job market is in the Philadelphia area for robotics? It might be very, very good in Bayonne, New Jersey. I don't know how far away that is, but it may be not within your commuting area. So now I graduate or I complete training and I'm a robotics expert. Guess what? There ain't no jobs unless I want to relocate. Well, I don't want to relocate. All my family's here, all my friends here, my network's here. What do I want to transfer for? Somebody should have did their labor market information research before they started training all these people for robotics. Now, it's a pretty common knowledge that what you're learning in computer technology, is everywhere. There's a need for it. There's a big shortage of computer technology people. I know how to spell technology, like I mentioned before. I know how to spell strategic. I can do a PowerPoint. I learned how to do a PowerPoint 4 years ago after I retired because I didn't have anybody to do it for me anymore. I had to do it myself. I can dabble in Excel. My wife is my Excel expert. When I'm doing Excel, I have to ask her for help. And I can do Word. Yeah, I can't do all this other stuff on a computer. I don't have the knowledge. And I honestly don't have, I don't think I have it up here to learn how to do the stuff that you guys are learning how to do. Okay, anything else? Yes, sir.
My concern is having gone through different programs. You know, some of them are fly by night.
Right, right.
You know, they pop into existence and then pop out. You know, and then they're not all that. Some of them weren't all that good to begin with. So you know, I don't find the Ticket to Work program all that wildly successful.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you heard what he said. There's a lot of fly-by-nights out there. And that's in a lot of different areas, whether it's training, you know, would you buy a used car from this person, you know, type of philosophy. As a consumer, we need to educate ourselves. Whether I'm buying a new car, a new home, a new refrigerator, I need to do my research. I need to know that I'm buying this from a reputable dealer, and this is a reputable product. This refrigerator is a reputable refrigerator. Or this service provider. Do your homework. How long has this, particularly if you're spending your own money, how long has this organization been in existence? What is their success rate? 80% placement successes. That's pretty darn good. Yeah, so you got to do your research. You got to do your homework. You got to figure out, yeah, is this an organization? I get approached, not so much as I did about 2 years ago, but I get approached probably once every 6 to 8 weeks from somebody that wants to start a new nonprofit that's going to solve all the problems for wounded warriors. And I'll say, well, have you defined the need? Oh, we know there's a need. How do you know there's a need? Where's the experience? Somebody approached me about 4 years ago about developing some program on mortgages and home loan defaults and so forth. And I said, you know, I've been in this business for 40 years. I've never heard of this being a problem. There's a lot of organizations out there that have solutions looking for problems. So this is where you know, what's the caveat emptor, you know, buyer beware. You have to be very, very careful. Somebody approached me not too long ago about actually making a donation to help start this new program. Duh, you know, I might give you 15 or 20 bucks because I think it's a good idea, but show me who are the people. Oh, I know what it was. There's an organization that wants to literally build a village where wounded warriors and their families can move together. And what they want to do is they want to take a closed military base. And I looked at their proposal and I said, conceptually it's not a bad idea, but it's not one of those things, build it and they will come. How do you know there's a need for this type of community in this city? Oh, we just know it's needed. How do you know that? Where's your market research? Where is your list of veterans that are said, hey, I'm willing to move to the suburbs of Detroit to live in this refurbished closed military base with other warriors? Why? I mean, show me who wants this. Show me who needs it. Yeah, we all can think of needs, but unless you can validate those needs, don't build something because you think it's necessary. Okay, it's 11:15. I think we're probably ran over.
Thank
but
you.
thank you all very much for your attention. I appreciate it.